Most of us know complainers. I remember an epic complainer when I became a chaplain in my first unit. This dude, he'd come to my office multiple times a week just to complain about how this was messed up, this was dumb, this policy was stupid. You know, his leaders, his subordinates, everyone was just dumb. Ugh. The army's dumb. The food in the mess hall, the music they play over the loudspeakers while they're doing PT on the road everything was just for this guy. We get downrange, we deploy to Afghanistan, and we get there. And what's he doing? Complaining about Afghanistan. And it's, dude, in all your problems, there's one consistent. You. We all probably know someone who's a complainer, a grumbler, but we're probably not very inclined to see ourselves as one. Unfortunately, however, it is all too common for us to be chronic complainers, chronic grumblers. In fact, it's almost not our fault. I mean, we live in a culture that conditions us to complain. We live in a culture that tells us that you deserve the best, that we should never settle, that we should have our rights met. You know, we need to fight for the right to party, in the words of the Beastie Boys. We have the right to voice our displeasure. If there's a wrong, don't trample on me. Our culture conditions us to complain. I will never, ever forget the cultural impact of this, as much as when I stepped off the plane having been deployed. And I came back, and I'm in Atlanta, right? I haven't even left the terminal. And I come out of the walkway from the plane, and immediately I'm barraged by Americans sitting around on their phones, and almost everyone was complaining about something. It was shocking to someone who just 14 hours before was in a country where their lives are terrible and no one complains. It was shocking. But I'm part of the problem. Today's passage is just a trilogy of snapshots that show the people traveling from the eastern shore of the Red Sea, making their way towards Sinai, where they will receive the law of God and formally, covenantally become the people of God. But Moses is burdened here to show how from the very beginning the people were grumbling and complaining. The first snapshot and the third snapshot in our trilogy today are about water. The people want water. The middle snapshot is about food. Today, we're going to look at grumbling, the heart of it, why we do it, and what its effects are. And we're going to see how in this passage, God shows us that He gives grace even to grumblers. Not because grumbling's okay, but because He wants to woo us away from our self-absorbed, faithless ways to seeing Him as being the one who can satisfy everything we need. First, we see that the people of Israel are grumbling about food and water. Food and water, guys. They're not asking for much. Food and water. I don't know about you, but for me, food and water is important. Do you need food and water? Are they complaining that their Starbucks latte doesn't have quite as much foam as they would like? No. They're complaining about food and water. Now, God made us to need food and water. So their need for food and water isn't really scandalous or surprising. So what's the problem with them pointing out that they need food and water? Well, they're not pointing out that they need food and water. They're grumbling. They're grumbling that they don't have it. And lest you think that they were literally parched to the point of dehydration, their throats were wet enough for them to complain. Remember that at the heart of all grumbling isn't a true life and death lack. What it is they did not like the circumstance they were in, and they did not like the water that they had and the degree to which they had it. All grumbling in this regard is they are not happy with the lot that God has set out for them. But we don't see that. They don't see that. For them, they need food and water. And what happens with our sinful hearts is that we take good things, and when we need something good, our sinful heart warps it into a demand for that thing in a particular way based upon our tastes, our disposition, our temperament, our attitude. Notice the our, us, me. We want something in a particular way. We take these legitimate needs and desires that God has given us as people, and sin warps it. And it becomes this clawing demand. And we say, if I don't get what I want in the way that I think that I need it, then I'm not getting it at all. And you're wronging me. And so they grumble. They grumble against Moses, and they grumble against Aaron. We see this in our own lives, in our workplaces, in our homes. We see it in our marriages. We see it with our kids. We see it with our parents. We see this grumbling. If they loved me, they would do X, Y, or Z. And X, Y, or Z is always in accordance with my whim. If God loved me, He would do this. And it wouldn't just be this. He wouldn't just give me shelter from the rain. If God loved me, I'd have it this way. If God loved me, I wouldn't have to wonder where tomorrow's food's going to come from. I would have a fridge in the house and a fridge in the garage stuffed with food and a storage freezer beside. That's the attitude. And when we don't get what we want, when they didn't get what they want, their attitude becomes hard. And it happens all the time. The worker who becomes dissatisfied in a very good work environment. I mean, I remember I've had some jobs that at the time I thought were so lousy. Ugh, this jerk boss. And it's only when you leave that you realize, man, I had it pretty good. And if I had actually just been paying attention to the mercies of God in my life at the time, I would have said at the time, God, thank you for this job, for this provision. So in our homes, a husband wants his wife's respect and his wife's attention. And when he doesn't get it the way he wants it, he becomes cold and distant, resentful. When a woman wants her husband's affection and doesn't get it the way she wants, she becomes bitter and angry. When a child wants acceptance and he doesn't find it the way he thinks he should get it, he becomes angry, withdrawn, and a consummate people pleaser. The manager who wants an efficient, hardworking workforce becomes cynical, operating out of a theory Y personality, and becomes a micromanaging jerk. I could go on and on about how sin takes a desire for a good thing and warps it into this expectation for that thing in a certain way, and we become grumbling and bitter. Most of us think that our complaints, our grumbles, are about legitimate things. That's the way it works. And I think Google has made it worse. Google, it's amazing. Just this morning even, I just open Google and I start typing, and it's like before I can even finish typing the word, every possible combination, that's what we want. Before we even have finished uttering the desire, we want someone to have already thought it before us and have planned out how to carry out and fulfill our wishes. That's what we want. And our culture in Google has made us want it even more. And because of our self-absorption, we're very much like Emperor Cusco in the Emperor's New Groove. My kids were watching that this week. And he's this self-absorbed emperor guy. And everything has to be his way. And as soon as someone bumps into him and throws off his groove, they're literally chucked out the window. That's the way we are. Give it to me my way, or else. And so we sit here, chronically dissatisfied, chronically unhappy, and we blame other people. We blame the other. They blame the other. In this text, the Israelites blame Moses. Now, remember, there's a cloud that's guiding them by day and by night. But remember how I said this cloud must not have been as imposing as we like to think it was, because they never seemed to pay it much mind. And when they're unhappy, they blame Moses. So if you say, it's not Moses' fault, if Moses is saying, oh, well, you're not really grumbling against me. No, oh, we're blaming you. You're an incompetent leader. You don't know what you're doing. You're not sensitive to our needs. Worse, you have mean intent. You led us out here to kill us. They go on and on, forgetting that really our discontent and our continual dissatisfaction with God's provision in our life is a sign of the heart. Jesus has told us in Matthew 12:34 that it's out of the overflow or abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. And so a mechanic is able to turn on the car, and you can tell a lot about a car by the way it's running, by the sounds it makes. In the same way, we can consider that grumbling is the feedback of a discontented, sour heart. It's a heart problem. At the core of it all is an issue that it's not just unbelief. It's just not lack of faith. It's dissatisfaction with the leadership of God. It is possible to believe in God and still be a continual grumbler because we are dissatisfied with the leadership of God, the sovereignty of God to direct our steps. It's a fundamentally self-absorbed notion of the world that is the problem, because we want to be like God. There are 3 telltale signs that your heart is chronically dissatisfied, that you have a hard issue with God. There are 3 aspects that can reveal that your satisfaction is being found and being catered to according to your whims. First, we get anxious in circumstances. Second, we get angry in circumstances. And third, we look for an escape from our circumstances. And believe it or not, you see all 3 of it here. They're anxious, they're angry, and they're wanting to escape. They're anxious. In 16:20, they don't really believe that there's going to be manna the next day. Now remember, God has provided for them. They have just passed through walls of water. And they still doubt. They still don't believe. An empty belly speaks pretty loud. And so they're nervous, and they don't believe that there's actually going to be food the next day. They're not resting in God's promise to provide just enough for the day. They're not satisfied with a promise to provide just enough for the next day, for that day. And so they have their anxiety and they have their anger. They lash out. They're ready to stone Moses. And ultimately, in full-on rebellion in Numbers 14, they're actually picking up stones to stone Moses. And the only thing that saves Moses is God physically shows up. Anger at not getting it their way. And third, you see them desiring an escape in this ridiculous romanticized memory of Egypt that they've just left. Oh, we had meat pots and bread to the fill. Oh, so great. As they're throwing your babies in the river, as they're lashing you, as they're dragging you away from your homes for weeks at a time as slaves. It was so great. But it's imperative that we see in ourselves those same three symptoms. What are you putting your trust in to satisfy you? What are you seeking? What are you craving to give you security and meaning and hope? Is it God? Are you content with His leadership? Or is it something in the world? So 3 diagnostic questions. What causes you to become anxious? When you're lying awake at night, not able to sleep, or when you're fretting or you develop a nervous tic, what is it about? Chase that rabbit. Reflect and find out, what is it that's causing my anxiety? What causes you to get angry? Now, there's public outbursts, there's lying down, having a temper tantrum, but there's also just simmering. Just this anger that just burns in your heart. What is it? And what about an escape? From what are you seeking an escape? Whether it's becoming a drunk, or maybe it's just sitting in front of the TV for hours and hours and hours, eating a quart of ice cream. I had an NCO. He fell asleep. It was crazy. He fell asleep. How do you fall asleep? He fell asleep with his chair. His feet were kicked up on the desk. He came back, and he had M&Ms coming out of his mouth. How did he not choke in the night? But just seeking to fill yourself with anything that makes you forget what you're in. It's imperative that we discover these heart issues and deal with them by virtue of repenting, by virtue of what the Puritans would call mortification, that is, slaying the deeds and desires of the flesh. And then vivification, that is, living by the Spirit. We've got to. Because if you don't, it's poison. This generation, there has never been a generation on this earth that has seen the preponderance of earth-shattering signs, and they were all destroyed in the desert because they didn't believe. They refused to believe. That's why this generation right here serves as a repeated example and warning in the New Testament of what we must be careful not to be. Because they saw the wonders of God in a way that most people never ever do. Our demands spend time talking to us. And oftentimes our hearts tell us that I'm not getting it my way, that God doesn't love me, my kids don't love me, my husband doesn't love me, my wife doesn't love me, my parents don't love me, my teachers, and it just tells us, and we become angry, and we're listening to our heart. Now, those of us who've read the Bible at least once know that the Bible says a lot about the heart. Jeremiah is the most emphatic, I think. The heart is desperately wicked. deceitful above all things. Our heart lies to us. So why on earth do we listen to our heart in just about every decision of consequence? I used to say as a chaplain, my ministry was helping people pick up the pieces of following their heart. Your heart lies to you. These people had the audacity. The third episode. So they've seen everything in Egypt, right? They've seen the Red Sea. They've seen the dead bodies floating. They've grumbled about water, not having enough of it. So God not only works a miracle and purifies some water, he then leads them to a full-on oasis. That's wonderful. He sends quail. He sends manna. And then they still, is God among us or not? Does he or she love me or not? What? And reason doesn't work because it's a heart that is just hard. Don't listen to your heart for 3 reasons. First and foremost, it will harden your heart to God's will and make it that you won't hear the gospel. Because the gospel says that you are desperately wicked and there is nothing good in you. And you are damned if God leaves you alone. And God comes and offers you forgiveness in life. Not here, not now. He doesn't promise you a Corvette and a mansion. He promises you a hard road and glory ever after. And you won't hear the gospel because it doesn't sound like something you can trust in. It's interesting. Look up the word grumbling, or any of its cognates. The people of Israel grumble against God in the wilderness from the time they leave Egypt to the time this generation is judged in Numbers 14. The grumbling concept is in the Bible a lot. But then the word grumble or any of its forms is not in the Bible again until someone else comes on the scene who tries to shake the boat. His name is Jesus. And then again, all of a sudden, the people of Israel are grumbling, discontent with the kingdom he offers. They want something better. They want messiahship on their terms. They want liberation and salvation on their terms. They're not happy with what he offers. And they couldn't hear the gospel when it was preached by the chief evangelist. Grumbling and discontentment will keep you from hearing God's gospel. But second, it will prevent you from seeing the glory of God and enjoying him. They had the cloud with them every day, and they didn't see it. They didn't notice it. It didn't cause them to pay any mind because their hearts were so focused on what they didn't have or what they had in a way that they didn't like. And they didn't see everything that God was doing around them. It's the same for us. Isaiah 6 says that the earth is full of the glory of God. How many of you see that? How often do you see the glory of God in a context where the Bible tells us that the earth is full of it? If we have a grumbling, discontent heart, we won't see that. But God is at work in us, among us, doing amazing things. What's amazing is we talk about people needing reasons to believe as if there's not reasons out there. But for the person who sees the glory of God in all things, it's almost like you need a reason not to believe. It's there. But a grumbling, malcontented heart will keep you from seeing that and savoring it. And third, it will poison your relationships with other people. It will sour you and harden you. They had the audacity regarding Moses, okay? There's none of us who stand in relation to any of us the way Moses stood in relation to them, okay? It says in 1 minute, they believed in him. Oh my goodness. That's a pretty strong word. the things he did for them, the way he put himself on the line for them. And they didn't see it. They didn't appreciate it. They wanted to murder him eventually. That's what it does to us. It causes us to look at someone who has done amazing things for us, literally risked their life in this case. Going into Pharaoh like that, I know God's with him and all, but from a human standpoint, he was risking his life to go before that man. And we'll look at someone and say, you're not doing it this way. You brought me here to kill me. What? And today's Mother's Day. It's so easy for us to look at our parents and our mothers. Many of us, we grow up and we think, oh, they did it. They were all messed up. And we become critical or unappreciative. We're just trying to make our way. Be thankful. Be thankful. I have seen, and some of you have seen, horrors inflicted by mothers on their children. Be thankful. And mothers, I know it's hard. I know that to be a mother, you're raising a bunch of what seems like ingrates. And arguing and fighting fills your day, and you feel like a ring circus master or something. You're in a cage with lions. And you feel like you're wasting your life. And you feel like you're pouring yourself into people who don't appreciate. If my kids loved me, they would come before me with incense and olives and a fan, and my husband would just wait on my beck and call. Contrary to what your heart tells you, these struggles are not in vain. So take heart. The path of discipleship is thus. Jesus gives us his words, that there's not anyone who has given up, and his expression is houses or fathers or mothers or brothers or sisters or lands. But what he's saying is there's not anybody who has given up one of their dreams, one of their life goals, one of their plans. There's not anybody who has given up one of those for my sake who will not be rewarded 100-fold. So you're setting your life on pause, or so you think. Don't think of it as being paused. This is God's plan for you. And setting aside your own aspirations for what is obedience to his word, to raise your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, there is not one of you who will not receive back from the Lord 100-fold. For every single one. But that's the way of faith. And if you're busy like the Israelites, groaning and mumbling about not enough meat and bread, not enough water, when the Lord has already demonstrated he gives everything, then you're gonna miss it all. So the Lord promises them his power, his presence, and his provision. He gives all of that to make them get to their way. And God has promised the same for us. That's what Jesus is teaching us, that there is not one need of ours of which the Father is ignorant. He knows what we need. He knows where we're going. He knows how to get us there. What we need to do is shut up. And instead of saying, oh Lord, the lines for me have fallen in sour places, we need to say, Almighty God, if you would have treated me the way I deserved, I would be dead already. And you have given me exactly what I need to be exactly who you want me to be, to get exactly where you want me to go. And so I will follow, because it is by faith. None of you is better than Abraham, who has to follow without knowing where. And we travel, and we journey. And if you will receive God's good gifts at every turn, you will be content all your days. But if you will not, then nothing that transpires in this life will make you happy. Let's pray.
Word of God speak.